Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Awareness Podcast. I'm your host, Susan Telford, and I'm here today with my guest, Ellen Emmet. Welcome, Ellen. It's lovely to talk to you again.
Nice to see you, Susan.
For those of you that don't know Ellen, I'm just going to share her bio with you. Ellen's deepest intuition was confirmed when she met her teacher in the non-dual tradition, Francis Lucille. Hearing his words, she recognized the eternal, limitless, and universal nature of our shared reality. And over the years, this understanding has continued to unfold, to deepen, and to touch all levels of experience. At the very same time, Ellen has never ceased to delve into the depths of our human experience, seen and unseen, thirsting for a wholeness and connectedness that seemed to be lost or obscured. This unstoppable quest brought her to therapy, Jungian workshops, and later Jungian analysis, dream work, authentic movement, creative writing, and more. More and more, she senses that each of our lives is a journey of revelation and integration, including its darker crossings, through which the face of truth can shine uniquely and anew, wedding us to our direct experience and connecting us to the great family of creation. Ellen, I think that's one of the best bios I have ever read. It's
Yeah, I
just
was
so
thinking this.
poetic.
Well, I definitely did take care with it. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I really wanted to communicate that sort of conjunction between, the vertical path, direct path toward true nature and the more horizontal unfolding of our
Yeah.
lives.
Yes.
It's
And
not
it's
easy to
just,
articulate. It's not easy.
yeah. And it's just perfect for my particular segment of the Awakening podcast, which is integrating spiritual awakening in everyday life.
Yeah.
Um, so so there's so much in your bio. I really want to kind of pull bits of it out to begin our discussion, if that's okay. So the first sentence was Ellen's deepest intuition was confirmed when you met Francis Lucille. So I want to talk to you about that deepest intuition. How did you come to that? What was it, and how did you come to it? What was the beginning of your spiritual path like?
It's hard to trace it. I don't know when it started. I think it started when I was a little girl, and I was raised in a Catholic school, which was not very spiritual. But I would but I had this sort of love of Jesus, and a sort of, it was, so that's the intuition I think I mean, is a feeling in my heart for something up there, sort of up there and pure. And I would go to the local Catholic church. My parents were not religious, so I'd go by myself, at a young age, like, I don't know, 7 maybe. And
Huh?
I would stand there sort of bored by what the priest was saying, but enthralled by the statue of the Virgin, and something, so there was a sort of vibration or resonance all through my childhood. And but I didn't have any formulation, and not much of what was said in catechism resonated,
Yeah.
but the sweetness of the songs, and a feeling I had. It was a feeling. I mean, you know, that intuition, we all have it because we are coming out of it and made of it. So, yes, it's hard to, I didn't have words for it. Later on, as a young adult, I sort of embarked on a quest for it, but it being more I went to India, and I was sort of, went to ashrams and was looking for the feminine face of something spiritual. And so it was like that, it was like an intuition that there was more, that there was something that wasn't sort of ordinary and material. There was more. There was something that was more soulful and resonant.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I really resonate with that.
hmm.
Um, I was brought up in the Church of Scotland. It's a kind of Presbyterian church as a little girl, and I was in the church choir from the age of 7 with all the adults,
Mm,
and I had that same sense of just something.
mm,
Couldn't put my finger on it, but it was ignited in me. I can remember um, being a little girl, maybe even 5 or 6 years old at school at Easter time, singing that hymn, "There is a green hill far away." I don't know if you know that hymn.
no, but I can
And it's
imagine.
all about where the dear Lord was crucified. And I was sobbing my eyes out as a tiny little girl that how could they do that to Jesus?
Yeah.
And it was yeah, so that kind of ineffable
Yes.
child, that something that a child resonates with, that turns out to be the truth.
I
Yeah, I
know.
really get that. I
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that then you
And
met Francis. So what point was that? What happened? So you went to
well, I met Francis in
India.
my 30s. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, carry on.
I went to India and I remember having a dream, which I won't get into because it was a big dream and a long dream. But there were like little clues, and I had a friend, my friend Doris, who was older than I was. She was 20 years older, and she always walked around with Nisargadatta. I am that. Is that what it's called? Yes, it is.
Yes.
And she became a sort of pointer. She was a very dear close friend, but also a sort of daunting older mentor figure that had something I didn't have, and I spent a lot of time with her, and I would ask her questions, and she would read Krishnamurti and all these people. So I began I sort of was interested intellectually, and I went to see Amma, who's this
Yes.
spiritual saint, I guess, in India, and there was a resonance there, and so following my little meandering paths until I was then living in California in my early 30s, and not a happy necessarily young woman, battling an eating disorder, depression, not unhappy 24/7, but there was it
Yeah.
wasn't I hadn't I was really needing something, and I didn't know what it was, and so I would make my way to all sorts of workshops, and I remember going to a Krishna Das chanting workshop. I don't know if you know Krishna Das.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Um, and he's lovely. And there was an older man, Mike was his name, who we made friends. And he asked me, "Do you know this guy Francis Lucille?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard of him, but he's French and he's an engineer. I don't think I'm interested in." And he
No,
sort of
not the
talked to me.
feminine face.
Right. And I was like, I don't think so. Anyway, he was telling me more about Francis. And then I went home, and the next week I came home from work one day, and there was this big carton, and Mike had given me all his tapes, all his audio tapes of Francis, because he didn't need he knew the teaching, so I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to give this guy more of a try. I had listened to Francis in the past, and it hadn't really resonated. So I took a tape, and in those days you had audio tapes, and you had cars with
Yes.
audio in it. So I stuck it in, and it was in the middle of the tape. I was driving somewhere. I stuck it in, and I heard Francis's voice saying, "Consciousness knowing itself." And I had a glimpse. I had a moment, one of those moments, where, and so then I thought, and then I listened to more, and then I listened to more and more and more, and then I thought, I need to meet this guy. And he lived really sort of down the road, as we say here in the UK.
Yeah.
I was in Northern California, and he was in Southern California. So I started going to see him, and it was a very, very deep connection with his teaching. And so I went to everything I could. Every weekend I was, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a real grace to meet Francis.
Yeah.
And it's funny how I had said no, I'm not, and it just it's that feeling that life is living you, and even when you sort of turn your back on something that's meant to be, it's going to happen one way or the other. It's going to catch up with you.
Yeah. It's so like the GPS on the car, isn't it?
Yes.
You take a wrong turning,
Yeah.
and eventually, do a U-turn. It brings you
Exactly.
back. It's
And of
yeah,
course, the U-turn and the going off piece is meaningful too. So it's all,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's something that I've been exploring a lot recently, this thing about not choosing your thoughts.
yes.
I heard um, Francis talk about that on a YouTube video, and I was thinking, yeah, but yeah, I get we don't choose the thoughts that come in, you know, they just appear. But surely there's a choice then of what ones to take action on. And Francis is saying, no, no, that's thought 2 or that's thought 10. And I've really been sitting with that
Yeah.
recently and looking at is that actually true? And yes, it is. And then it's amazing the effect that then has, isn't it? Can you
Yes.
speak more about that?
Well, you've just spoken about it really beautifully because it's not, it's quite mysterious. I mean, we can analyze it and we can investigate and observe
Mm,
that that experience. We it's just it's our experience that we don't choose our thought. But yet here I am speaking, and I seem to be choosing what I'm going to say next
yeah,
to you, Susan, who will then respond and seems to be so. I don't really know what to say about that. To me, what's important to really understand is it's fine to have a feeling that I'm like at this moment I do feel that I'm in charge of what I'm going to say next. But I do know that it's not a separate one that is in charge. There is no separate self here that has autonomy in terms of the co-creation, the next creation itself. So yes, Ellen has a sense of what she's going to say next, and a sense that she could decide to, end this meeting or whatever. But she knows that whatever happens is not her sort of individual. She's not operating as a fragment. She's operating as a totality, as a
yeah,
co-creation. Um, and it's humbling, and
yeah.
but it doesn't mean we shouldn't feel free to to want and to act on behalf of that feeling that I am choosing, and I have freedom because it's true too. I mean, it's a totality operating
Yeah.
as this.
Yeah, I think at first I thought, oh, does that just mean like I'm some kind of automaton? I'm just, being lived, being moved. What does that even mean? What about and then I suddenly realized it's absolute freedom
Yes,
and the
exactly.
end of guilt.
Yes, exactly. The end
Uh,
of guilt, that's a
the
good
end
one.
of guilt is
Like the way it's
huge.
been brought up in those scriptures. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned you looked for the feminine face.
Hmm.
So did you find that? What
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find it so much with Francis, obviously. I mean, actually, that's not true because with Francis, when you spend time with him and go on retreats, you have the yoga meditations and then you have satsang. And the yoga meditations were all to do with the body, obviously, and tactility and the senses and the felt sense and welcoming that. And um, it had to do more with vibration, you could say, with an understanding that's not of the mind, but of the body. So it's direct. And when I went to Francis yoga and I felt how I felt during those yoga meditations, and then I could remember going to India and sitting with Amma, or sitting by the Ganges, or smelling, in India, all the incense and the kind of experience in India that to me was more feminine because it was more about the tactile, sensual flow of life. It wasn't about the purity of meditation. It was about losing all control because everything was happening all at once, and there were a lot of women, actually, a lot of beautiful women with beautiful saris, and temples with stones that indicated the goddess, and all of that. Somehow it connected. There was a connection between that goddess culture in the Indian tradition and the Kashmir yoga tradition, the non-dual yoga tradition, that actually when we go to the understanding through the body, we touch, I want to say, the Great Mother, that which allows everything, that which gives rise to everything, Shakti. I don't know, all these are words, but there was a deep connection. And I have always been interested in redeeming something like that, because I think in our Western culture, we've lost touch a little bit with the feminine in the sense of trusting our felt sense, our intuition, our tactile intelligence. We give prevalence to reason. It's a bit of a stereotype, but it's true. And when you go to the East, you still find that it's not so much. It's not so much the case still over there.
Yes, yes.
The not knowing, the not knowing, that the path of not knowing, which was also very much part of Francis's teaching, especially in those meditations. And the path of not knowing, to me, is deeply feminine. I don't know what that means and why I say that.
Yes.
But it's to do with a knowing that is not conceptual, that's...
Yes. It feels, it perhaps feels like masculine energy to analyze and conceptualize, and more
Yeah.
feminine energy to feel in the body. And that's, I really want to talk to you about that. Your work is all around the awakening body. And a lot of our listeners come from Course in Miracles background, where the teaching "I am not a body"
I know.
can be misunderstood.
Yes.
Or can lead to a rejection of the body and anything to do with the body. Well, I'm not that, so I don't need to pay any attention to that.
Yeah.
But what I'm really interested in is, what is the role of the body in awakening? Because we're here in these vehicles.
Yes, we are.
And
can I just say one thing about this feminine masculine? I'm just aware of the
stereotypes. Yes.
And when I use the word feminine, I think I'm feeling something different than just the gender thing. It's more like yin yang, and as you said, the reasoning faculty and versus the felt sense, knowing the path of knowledge, the path of higher reasoning versus the path of feeling, the path of love. And it's not really that one is masculine and the other one is feminine.
I didn't mean it in the sense of...
and I know.
Women. I was thinking more of jnana and bhakti.
Exactly. That's beautiful. Just for our listeners, that they don't think, But anyway, back to your other pathway now towards the body, the role of the body in awakening.
Yeah.
Good question. I mean, how could it not have its place? And for me, Christ, Jesus, is such a pointer to that. That's, to me, because in the non-dual tradition, the direct path, you talk about consciousness, and even though we do explore the body, we don't even, we say welcoming the body, and to see that the body arises in consciousness, that all it's made of is consciousnness, that it's limitless, that it has no borders. And that's very much part of what I point to in my teaching. So we in a way, in the non-dual approach, we're quite readily going to the felt sense, but collapsing the body back into awareness. The body is made out of awareness. And I think that's very important. But what I love about the Christian path, or rather the Jesus teaching, is that he was a man with a body. He had a body, and this body suffered.
Yes.
And was crucified, and properly suffered. I mean, he had a moment of overwhelm, on the cross, wondering if he had been let down by God. So, And that the path of suffering, or the Christian path, is also the path of suffering, because it seems to me that Jesus could have sort of shown up as an ethereal body, never really feeling the impact of anything, and dispensed its teaching, but he didn't. He came as a human person, and he felt what he felt in a very real way. So somehow I feel that's very significant in the process of awakening.
Yes. I
That
think about the Garden of Gethsemane
yes,
in the Bible, you know, that he if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. And he was sweating
yes,
beads
blood,
of blood. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And and in the Kashmir non-dual yoga, where we go to the body. So yes, the body has a place in awakening, because actually there's a very deep and ancient tradition that sort of explores the body as a spiritual pathway and as a way for the revelation to take place. So in this approach, we welcome the suffering, the resistance, the all of which at the level of the body perpetuates the belief in separation, in suffering. So and if we don't do that at the level of the body, then it just stays an intellectual, or maybe more than intellectual, it can be a heartful understanding. But if you don't take it into the body, if you don't, or rather if you don't let the body speak to you and begin to invite you to explore that experience, that dimension, with obviously with your love of truth as a guide, then you're missing out. In a way, you're missing out.
Yeah.
You're missing out big time, because it's such a deep realm of intelligence and of a kind of exposure to reality that is not conceptual. So when we go through the body, just by being with our felt sense, by just being with our felt sense without knowing, something takes place that is profound, and in a way doesn't need words, but then it echoes the words that we have also received through the traditions, or that we have discovered through our teachers. It's like it fits.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yes.
I'm not sure if I make sense sometimes.
Oh, you're making sense. Well, what I'm taking from that is that we cannot exclude the body. And if we do try to exclude the body by, having a belief that I'm not the body and therefore I don't need to attend to it, then we're missing a whole realm of investigation and integration of any glimpses or understanding that we might
Absolutely.
have. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also we're doing something else which is tricky. I think it's an expression of ignorance to ignore the body. Because and we see this. We see I'm not the body, or that's just, an experience that is difficult at the level of the body will be easily bypassed by going to a spiritual truth. So you may feel something in the body that you barely register, and quickly you grab a nice spiritual truth
Yeah.
that you
But
can
it's the same with
unpack
ignorance.
very well, and you can argue it, and you can even sort of experience it, but you're not realizing that. I think that's the spiritual bypass. It's very easy to do, because we all would rather not go to that territory that's defies conceptual control, and is layered, is full of layers, and some of them will have to do with our childhood trauma and our, who knows, our past lives. I don't know, or we have to. It's an acquired taste. We have to fall in love with this body, with this realm, and realize how, yes, it can be very dense, the body, and very contracted and very unpleasant, but if we can say yes to it, it's alive, and it responds, and it softens, and it delivers something that it was holding, and that thing that it delivers is a vibration that echoes the greater vibration. And all of that has to do with love.
Mm.
So I think through the body, we discover that we are love itself. First, we discover our longing for love and how we're cut off from love. And then somehow through continued exploration, we dissolve in love.
Yeah.
Compassion first, maybe.
Mm.
Tears first. Emotions first, because they need space to unfold. They are the frozen ignorance that needs to sort of come back to life, and in that there's a real current of love.
I think that that's often where it's tempting to bypass when you come to a difficult emotion
Yes.
that has somehow caused some contraction in the body.
Yes.
And we come to that and think, oh no, it's just meant my true nature is peace and happiness. So that's wrong. That
Yes.
I don't want to look at that. And to me, that is the feminine practice of actually stopping and saying, no, I want to embrace that.
Yes.
It's like I wrote a poem once about embracing your long lost children.
Yes.
All those emotions that I wouldn't feel before are now welcome here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's such a beautiful image. And if you think about in the Indian tradition, the more Bhakti approach, but the Bhakti approach, if you go all the way, it's the non-dual approach. There's so many, Amma, Ananda Mahima, there's these beautiful expressions of embrace, of compassion, embrace. Yeah. I mean, you said it beautifully.
Mm. So
It's very simple, that there are no fancy concepts about being unlocated, located, is awareness, is it born? It's all at the level of the body. It's much more simple. It's like just really more simple.
So let's talk about physical pain, because often we hear people say things like, just welcome the pain. And the people who report that they have done that, 9 times out of 10, it's then said, and the pain went away.
Really? Yeah.
And so the question that I want to ask is, what happens when the pain doesn't go away? When you are welcoming, you're welcoming the pain, you're welcoming your experience, and it doesn't actually shift.
I mean, the welcoming position is not a position we adopt. It's really the position of our true nature, right? So let's say you start meditating or sort of meditating and welcoming your bodily sensations, and there's pain. And then you think, well, I must welcome the pain. And the problem with that is that sometimes you then sort of contract your attention a little bit towards the pain with a very subtle or not so subtle agenda that maybe if I welcome this pain, it will go away. So that is hardly welcoming. See, the welcoming we're talking about is just completely devoid of an agenda. And it's not something we can manufacture, because we usually do have agendas, and they're very natural. If there's physical pain, we'd like to be free of that. If there's psychological suffering, we'd like to be free of that. So we have to also include in our welcoming the agendas to be free of physical or psychological pain. That's, in a funny way, the welcoming takes us back to welcoming. It's like we fall in love with welcoming itself, and we don't really mind what the unfolding of experience is. It's not about getting rid of anything at all. Yeah, really not. But we will have a great deal of layered desires to get rid or change things, and that's what we're welcoming. Really, we're welcoming these layers of agenda, of wanting things to be different. In terms of physical pain, sometimes it's better to go get an aspirin or a painkiller, or I definitely don't recommend focusing your attention on, an area of the body that has chronic pain. It's much better to sort of welcome the totality of your experience without too much emphasis on the place that hurts, because that's too much attention. Like if you have a toothache and then you start to focus on it, even with this idea that I'm going to welcome it, actually, more often than not, you're
Feels
exerting.
worse.
So it would be more like, if there's pain, to welcome the totality of your experience, as Francis would say, with the little cloud of pain there amongst all the other clouds, and sort of cultivate a benevolent indifference, another Francis term.
Yes.
I think where the welcoming is more effective in terms of bringing your attention a bit closer would be with psychological suffering or pain, an emotion that is more psychological, a contraction in the heart, or a sadness in the throat, and there sometimes it's very good to come close with your attention, as if you're coming close to like you said earlier, with a sort of quality of embracing or caressing. You can come closer with your breath, and the message you're bringing is, you're okay, like, I'm here, there's friendliness, and that can send a message to the emotion, to the psychological suffering, that it's safe to unfold, to come out, tears can flow, or a sound can come out of the mouth, so with psychological suffering, it can be very good to come close. But with physical pain, I think it's more a matter of relaxing your attention away from the pain without ignoring it. It's tricky, physical pain, because sometimes it's just chronic, and
Yes.
there's nothing we can do.
Yes.
It's more deep acceptance, and we have to know what kind of pain can go away, and what kind of pain is part of our.
Yeah, because I've heard people express a kind of feeling of failure. That's again this, the same kind of thing, that I mustn't be doing it right because I still have this pain.
So
I still have this chronic illness. No matter how much I practice, it's still here, and therefore there must be something wrong with me.
Oh yeah, that's such a misunderstanding,
Yes.
because a chronic illness may never go away. Even a depression, even a sort of tendency towards a certain psychological state may continue, but there will be more kindness around it, more understanding, more compassion. It will be more okay. It will not be a failure of me, because you'll have seen that there is no such person. There may be clusters of conditioning that are tightly wound up, so it takes a long time to undo, and you may not have enough of a lifetime. But what changes is that it doesn't matter that so much, that when you find yourself in a dip of depression, you know what to do. You know not to get too involved with it, but to be caring. Or maybe it's time to give your attention to others, because that helps you. You find your ways to deal with it kindly, not to feel it's a failure. There is no such thing as a failure, but there's definitely a belief in failure, and I have had my own versions of it. So
Yes.
I still do. But there, if we think that we can fail as on the spiritual path, it's because there's a big spiritual agenda.
Yes.
And
so that's so true, isn't it? I think because all of this material is freely available to us now by means of books and the internet and everything, it's easy to read about things, and then if it doesn't match your experience, to think, oh,
it's very easy. And that's why I find it's Yeah, those of us who point must be careful not to send a message, of that it's simple. All you have to do is this, A plus B plus C, and you'll get there. That's not my experience. There's a simplicity, there's a direct path for sure, and we can go to our experience and really establish that. But somehow, in the unfolding of our everyday life through our circumstances, there it's life is a demanding journey, adventure. A bit like myths and fairy tales, the princes and princesses and heroes and they have to go through stuff. They don't just sit there. And
The hero's journey wasn't a cakewalk, was it?
it wasn't. And I think we're all on our little hero's journey. It's sort of maybe the path of surrender. It's all about surrendering our beliefs and our spiritual beliefs, big time.
Yes. Because it's so easy to develop a spiritual ego.
Super easy.
Yes.
And of course, it's very understandable.
Yeah.
It seems to be a very transparent garb that we can hide in. It's luminous and transparent, like a spiritual ego.
Yeah, I liked the part in your bio where you wrote, more and more she senses that each of our lives is a journey of revelation and integration, including its darker crossings. And that,
life is the main teacher.
Yeah.
And life sometimes definitely brings difficult things for all of us. And I don't know if you now are of a certain age. I'm just kidding. At 60, and
now that I'm 60, Ellen,
we can look back and at the times that were difficult, and we can see how much learning there was, how many beliefs had to be set down, how we held on for dear life, and how we can see how those moments were such gifts in retrospect.
Oh, definitely.
And also how. Yeah, sorry, Susan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in my own life, I became a maths teacher in my 40s. I went to university and did a maths degree when I was 43. And I loved that job and felt I'd found my vocation. I was head of year in a school. And then I had a complete burnout in 2016, which meant I couldn't go back to school. I had to give up. And at that point, I honestly felt as though my life was over. I was chronically ill, really fatigued, really not well, in bed for months and months on end, and just thought, well, I've completely ruined my life, was my narrative.
Yeah.
And yet that was the turning point for me. Yeah. It was a real point of seeing something different.
Yeah.
Because I had to look at all the ways I had pushed myself, all the ways I was a people pleaser, all the ways I was a good girl, this driven type A personality that just pushed itself to physical collapse.
Exactly. And I think sometimes the spiritual teaching can give us the idea that we're exempt of doing any of that, because we know what's what. We know that our true nature is peace and happiness. So all we have to do is go back there. And sometimes life catches up with us, and it's a good thing, because even though it's hard, not to say that was your case, because it sounds like
it was hard. It was very hard.
Yeah.
But it was one of those massive GPS course corrections.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I knew that, there was something else really that I was being pointed towards, and I was staying in the safety of the proper job, the conventional life.
Exactly.
And I eventually.
But I guess what I meant to. Sorry, we're so passionate about this stuff. But I guess what I wanted to say is that this can happen after you've met the non-dual teaching, and after you feel like you sort of have it under your belt, and then boom, something happens, and you have to go, who knows, you have to go back to therapy, because sometimes we need a bit of assistance, or you need to do some work to turn over some stones to see what's happening here, what's happening. And it's humbling, and it's amazing that in the end it's
as you said, in retrospect, you just see the perfection of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think that's the grace of all of us who are interested in the truth and discover the truth, is that we get to really appreciate the intelligence and
Mhm.
beauty and perfection of it,
Yeah.
as opposed to people who don't have that grace and who maybe struggle with understanding why suffering, why,
And yet that's just the absolute freedom, isn't it? To
Yes.
to be, I think I used to feel as though, oh, I wish everybody knew. I wish, how can I tell them? And then
Yes.
that kind of just dissolved because of
Yes. Yes.
the freedom to
Yes.
express however.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Ellen, you're coming to teach again at the Integrated Awakening series in September. I'm really excited about that. I think it was September last year that you did your
Yeah,
workshops as
maybe.
well.
I
You seem
remember.
to be hitting on September. Um, so you're going to be very much talking about the awakening body. And so say a little bit about what these two workshops, I think 5th and 19th of September, two 2-hour workshops with Ellen, what might people experience with you?
Well, I think I won't be talking about, as you know, Susan, because you've come to my
Yeah.
things. But rather we'll have an experiential, because that speaks for itself to begin with. We'll share a yoga meditation, so it will very much be with the body, the felt sense, and then there'll be, and then I'll talk about what pretty much what we've been talking about today, with maybe more pointed towards also taking questions, so more pointed towards whatever came up for those of you who come. Um, there are themes that always come up, but that's the general content of the two workshops: experiential and then conversation, exploring all these themes of
Yeah.
awakening and body and suffering and life.
Life. Yeah. And embracing it all.
Yeah.
the You're quoted from being there last September. I can't tell you the number of times you've been quoted in our meetings, and people have said, "Oh, I remember Ellen said, I am not in my body is in me."
Yes.
That's really stuck with people.
Yes. Yes,
So
I know. I
just
think
say a
that.
little bit about what that means for those that think
So I guess
that.
when we start exploring the body, usually the very conditioned way we perceive ourselves is as living inside a body, inside an envelope, which, blonde, frizzy hair, has a certain age, etc., etc. And when we close our eyes, how we perceive our body to begin with is very much sort of in line with that belief that I live in a body, an envelope. And quite soon, I hope to be able to guide you to see that actually in your direct experience, it's the other way around. You are not in the body is in you. You being just this presence, this felt presence, which actually, if you go to look for its borders, you can't actually find its borders. Now, when I say this, it's quick, but when we explore it, it will take time to really establish that I has no borders, or at least that you can't be sure if it has borders or not. And then I will hopefully be able to point us to the experience that what we call the body is actually a sort of unfolding of feelings, sensations, pulsations that unfold in you, not you in it as a cage, but it in you as a living flow. So that's what's
Mhm.
meant by that quote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. And I know from having been in your classes that you really do guide us to have an experience of that for
Mm,
ourselves.
mm, mm.
Yeah. Anything else you would like to say? I'm noticing the time always moves on so quickly.
It does, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I mean, no. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground, and
Yeah.
I look forward to, to sharing those two sessions.
Yes.
And it's lovely to talk to you, Susan,
Yeah, you too,
and
Ellen.
to hearing about you too.
Yeah. And next week, Jenny Beale is coming to be our one of our new hosts
Oh, wonderful.
on the podcast. And she's chosen as her overarching theme living and not knowing. So
Wonderful. Yeah.
we've already discussed that, which I think was a quote from Jean Klein. Is that right?
Probably, yeah. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised.
Yeah.
And Eric Barret, I don't know if you know Eric Barret, who was a student of Jean Klein, also often uses that phrase. And Francis often
Yes.
uses it. Yeah. I
So
guess they
that's
were both students of Jean Klein. So,
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
it's
that's what
lovely.
Jenny's taking as her overarching theme for her conversations.
Wonderful.
So, well, thanks very much for talking to me, Ellen. I'm really, really looking forward to your classes, which again will be the 5th and the 19th of September, 2 hours from 3 p.m. Eastern. Information about these workshops will be in the show notes for this podcast. So, thanks so much for joining me, Ellen, and thank you everyone for listening. Bye bye.
Thank you, Susan. Bye bye.